Okay, so welcome along to week 3. Really good work over the last couple of weeks, the intro session and the lesson planning. So it seems like everyone seems to be engaged in the lesson planning thus far. So I've been very impressed with especially the discussion board posts over the first couple of weeks. Lots of interaction, letting the teaching team know of your PE background, health and PE backgrounds, and how you best learn and those type of things. So I've been really impressed with everyone in the unit thus far, so keep up the great work. This week we're looking at classroom management, and obviously in week 2 we've been gearing up for assignment 1 with all the lesson planning type aspects, and within the unit plan for assignment 1 that will involve 4 lesson plans. But the beauty of week 3 is learning how to actually manage the learning within the classroom. So you can be designing and developing as many learning activities as possible, but without actually managing the classroom and thinking of strategies and management plans, discipline aspects, then a lot of that learning that has been developed and designed will be unable to be delivered appropriately, and that can be quite frustrating as a phys ed teacher. So we'll get into a range of strategies and considerations for classroom management today, and once again, this lecture will most likely be split up into 2 parts. First of all, the importance of creating a positive learning environment. So positive is the key word there. I'll just start playing with my little, so positive learning environment. So that's where students will feel safe, they'll feel nurtured and respected, and if those 3 aspects are catered for, then students are going to be a lot more engaged. They're going to want to be more likely to learn within your classroom, and with that in mind, it will not only optimize student learning, but that can actually, if you've got the students engaged in learning, then that can reduce misbehavior within your classroom as well. So having a classroom where students feel safe, feel nurtured and respected is a vital aspect, and we'll look at ways to do that throughout this mini lecture today. What it is, if given the opportunity to become responsible for their own learning, students will be more likely to actively participate in learning. So there's our first strategy for managing the classroom, providing students with ownership, and some of the key methods to do that are getting students involved in developing rules for the classroom, and then those rules can be consistently reinforced and referred to that the students have developed those. Obviously, the teacher can check that they're appropriate and those type of things, but that also is quite a key to classroom management. Rather than teachers setting the rules and the boundaries, providing students with a bit of input is also quite a good strategy. And there has been research that has found that students are more likely to actively participate and benefit when they're more self-motivated and they're involved in the learning process themselves. So this should be quite a primary goal for teachers, as lack of motivation is often the cause of a lot of disciplinary issues. So making sure that the students are part of the learning processes. How can you involve them in the designing of activities and learning, and of course classroom rules is a big one for that. Other strategies for creating a positive classroom environment, and once again, positive classroom environment will help minimize those disciplinary issues. Core ideals, and this is from the teacher perspective. So each teacher will have different standards and values they bring into the classroom, and these need to be consistent so that students know what to expect and what is expected of them. And consistency will be the key in a lot of disciplinary approaches. If you say one thing to one student, so you shouldn't be doing that, and then encouraging another student, then students will get mixed messages and they can act out. So another key word there, consistency, is something that needs to be constantly looked at within your teaching practice. It's also important to let your students know that their environment is inclusive, respectful, and respect is probably one of the biggest expectations that a teacher can take in the classroom. I'll get into that a little bit further along. Community-oriented, and it's also important to remember the behaviour of the students will reflect, I was going to get into this on the last slide, the behaviour of students will reflect your actions in the classroom. So that's a really good thing to remember. You're a role model, and how you perceive the students can be reflected in their actions. So if you expect a lot of the students and that they're gonna be high achievers and they're gonna meet some of the goals that you've set, the parents have set, or whatever it may be, the students are more likely to respond that way. Or if you go into a classroom and you don't expect much of the students, then they can pick up that quite easily. So how you approach your teaching practices will often be reflected in the behaviour of the students. So that's how you've probably heard a lot, that how important enthusiasm is in the classroom and how infectious that is. Well, that reflects that assumption as well. Number two, ambience. It's a funny word, but this is also extremely important. Also, it's quite a little fun way of creating a positive learning environment. And it goes with the assumption that your classroom should be dynamic and an engaging place for your students. And a good way to create this is displaying student work samples. So it could be posters and other, it could be some of those brainstorming charts about a certain topic. The desk arrangements could be innovative, posters, models, anything like that, and that's putting some of the great work that the students have done on display, and then it's creating an atmosphere that's based around learning and display, and students will feel that their work is being recognised and can be seen. So that's another great way, using colour and innovative arrangements within your classroom. On the alternative, if your classroom is quite boring and students aren't engaged, then they can also act out. And there is a lot of research at the moment. I'm actually developing an article looking at what students have perceived, that if they are bored, they're more likely to act out in the schools. So that's something to consider. Number three, expectations. I briefly touched on this earlier in this little lecture. If you establish your expectations early and keep them consistent, you're able to avoid many of the classroom management issues. So your expectations, once they're outlined, they set the boundaries for the students. By having those expectations, the students know what they're allowed to do, how much leeway they have, and then if you're consistent and follow up with those expectations and have a discipline plan to follow up if they exceed those expectations, if they misbehave and don't align with those expectations, then you can have a discipline plan to follow up. So it's a really important strategy within your classroom. Laying down the ground rules early, and that will really help your success as a teacher. And whenever you're dealing with the students, you can refer back to those expectations, and those expectations can also be drawn up by the students who have contributed to those rules and expectations within your classroom. And yeah, as you can see, they involve your students to ensure they are aware of the rules and consequences. So that's another really good one there. Relativity. Number four, the role of the teacher goes both ways. You're responsible for imparting knowledge to your students, but you also need to learn from them as well. And throughout the next couple of weeks, we'll be looking at the importance of knowing your students, pre-assessing them with different diagnostic tools, surveys or reflective pieces or those type of things, because it's really important to know where your students have come from, their learning styles, their interests, their motivation, and those type of things, because that will allow you to get to know them and also tailor the learning so that they are engaged and they won't act out within your classes. And basically the materials and classroom activities can be relevant to those interests, which can help motivation again. And And without students interested in what they're actually being taught, it can result in further issues. Steps to a positive classroom environment. So how to further make your classroom respected, supported, appreciated, and valued. As I said, those surveys, personal shield posters, biographies, just getting to know each student, because once you know your students, you'll have a better connection with them, and they're less likely to want to act out and misbehave if they have a connection with the teacher. So that's really important. They need to know they are important. Filling the classroom with positive messages, so the students feel that like they will achieve something great, and their work will be appreciated. Providing frequently positive messages, encouragement, because if students are doing a lot of strong work within your class and then they're not being recognised, it's powerful to reinforce some of the great work they're doing, and letting them know, and that can be quite motivating for the students. Give the students outlets for expression as well, rather than having very textbooky type focus, which can occur in the odd occasion. Displaying work, creating boxes for students to place questions or concerns in, and that's good to get feedback on any of the student learning process as well. Conducting class meetings, and that's not your staff meeting type things, but just could be a briefing each morning, defining any expectations or things that have been raised over the last day or so, any issues or anything to do with the learning processes, and reinforcing the class expectations. Keeping those channels of communication open and being approachable, because if there are issues within the learning process, or if the students are bored about a certain concept, that can allow you to understand the students further. Allowing students to be able to talk to you about anything overwhelming and those type of issues as well. So these are really creating a positive classroom environment where students will less likely want to misbehave, and making it clear that everyone in class must conduct themselves in a respectful manner. And this is one of my favourites. When you are teaching it, it's really good to use that respect word. And by having that, you could even be on the board, and you can refer to this in terms of that could be your expectations for the class. Or you could create student expectations based around respect. Could be for themselves, the teacher, which is the obvious one, which the students come up with. But there's also respect towards other class members, especially if doing group activities and with the tight room constraints within classrooms. The environment as well, and that could be being respectful to the equipment being used in the PE class. It could be respectful to other students' workbooks or pencil cases or anything like that. Making discipline about accountability and growth instead of punishment, and being accountable to the expectations that have been developed. And that's rather than being punished. It's really just being accountable for what's been developed within that classroom setting, what the goals of that positive classroom atmosphere. You can also provide spaces for students to cool down if they do lose their cool about something, and it's impossible to manage human emotions and moods all the time. So that's a really good aspect to have there. Reflect inappropriate behaviour. Reflect on rather than inappropriate behaviour. Discuss other ways the students could have reacted, and that you can use that as a teaching moment as well. And reiterating all of those aspects and making the physical environment positive.